Welcome back to Everi. I am so glad that everybody is joining us this week. For this week, we have two really good chapters. Next week, we will have the Midnight Library review, and we will be reading off questions from the guide that I have received. Then we will understand exactly how popular this particular book is and how well it was written. This week, we only have 2 chapters to read to you, so we'll go ahead and get started. Chapter 8. The Truth of the Matter. The heirs have returned, Your Grace, and request an urgent meeting. Trent bowed as he rushed into the king's study. They have had some issues on the road. The king jumped up in fright. Is he hurt? Did he not return with his companion? Is it one of the princesses? He moved quickly to the door before Trent could assure him that all were well. The king slowed only a little with this news. My heart, our son has returned, and requests our attendance in a meeting. Alert King Everi and Queen Sandria as quickly as possible. Excitement and dread flowed through the bond back to him. Queen Aran ran to gather the other royals quickly. King Kristoff continued his descent down the stairs to his war room below. Prince Hanner laughed at Aruz as he guarded his snake head while servants tried vainly to retrieve it from him. Aruz, I will have it stuffed for you. Let them have it. The great cat let out a defeated growl as he laid the head in a servant's hands. Hanner checked the cub's tail cover to ensure that none could be harmed by accident until antidote was made. The cub was taught how to use his tail offensively while they were traveling. The unicorn foal, who was no bigger than a mountain goat, stood by Kira's side, lightly neighing for pieces of fruit from Kira's plate. The princesses giggled each time they heard the noise, knowing it was the sweetness the foal desired but needed sleep. The servants had attempted to take the colt to the stables for grooming and rest, but had quickly retracted their hands when Kira's dagger flashed at them. Lista sat quietly, her tome in her hands, nervously tapping her feet on the floor. She dreaded her father's reprimands for her actions. However, the three knew the time had come to discuss the many topics. Lista emptied her cup of wine, fumbling the dark veil around her lips, cursing it softly. Many exclamations came from the war room's open door as their parents entered the studio to assess their heirs. Queen Sandria fawned over the unicorn and determined her daughter to be in good spirits and whole. King Everi gave his daughter an appraising glance and sat in a chair, not bothering to assess her health. He needed no more words than the veil on her face to determine her standing with the prince. Her mother, Symbailia, nodded her approval and turned her daughter around, glad she displayed no injuries. Prince Hanner's parents spoke with their son, who told them he was well. No permanent harm had come to them. Queen Erin exclaimed at the mention of injury. Calming, she told her son they would speak of it later. Aruz sat proudly next to his prince and accepted praise and pats from the royal couple. Abner growled menacingly, and King Kristoff told the great wolf all was well. Abner retreated to sit in the corner and wait, unhappily. When everyone had settled down, Prince Hanner stood and addressed his elders. We have been through a great deal in the last few days. Details will be provided quickly. However, we must divulge a very significant occurrence. Lista stiffened, thinking he had decided to start with the bond. He felt her apprehension and glanced at her, shaking his head slightly. She relaxed visibly and waited for his following words. Early this morning an attempt was made on my life. The perpetrator was killed before we could question him, thanks to Princess Kira's sharp dagger and Aruz's impressive teeth. The dagger he carried was laced with black poison and came inches from my skin before Aruz tore the hand that wielded it off the assassin's body. We have confirmed it was the Uni. Gasp and babbling started at once, women in concern and disbelief, and the men requiring proof. Silently, the prince removed the severed hand from his sack and handed it to his father. King Kristoff cursed loudly and then closed his eyes in prayer and gave the hand to King Everi. Both looked to the prince and the beast beside him as ghosts. Queen Aran demanded to examine the dagger, but was quieted by the look on King Kristoff's face. "I would rather not have you examine something so dangerous, my love, if you so much as got one drop on your skin." Queen Aran nodded thoughtfully, forgetting for the moment the consequences of risking her life in such a way. "We are fine. None of us got hurt. However, we must begin to think about the Uni's return. I shudder to think how close they came." Prince Hanner looked at Lista nervously. She instantly knew what was coming. "We must also inform you of what happened on the hunt. The Alpha Manicore was slain, but not before I was gravely injured by its paw. Although the princesses fought well, I lost my concentration and couldn't avoid the hit to my side. Princess Lista saved my life with her knowledge." When he finished, she looked down at her hands, waiting for a reaction from her father. If she thought she knew the rituals well, he knew them better. Outraged, King Everi stood and began yelling at his daughter. "You perform the ritual of Unzaman? What cost did it require?" His arms flew up wildly, his anger reddening his face. "What right do you have to perform such dangerous ritual? How dare you show your face after such an affront to our beliefs?" He turned his back on her in anger. Lista sat silently with tears in her eyes, their tracks down her face hidden by her veil. It wasn't only her blood spilled to save the prince's life. I assisted in the ritual. I had a choice, and I chose to save him. Neither of us was chosen as his betrothed, so we did it together, knowing he would marry one of us. Kira's small voice faltered at the end, indicating something had gone wrong. They were not saying. "Tell me of this ritual. What do you feel? What has changed?" King Kristoff glanced between the three, demanding answers. Lista opened the tome and showed it to the king, whose smile grew, then faltered. Confusion and concern filled his face. "This ritual you call Unzaman is the same as our wedding ritual, the sanctum. I expect you can hear each other's thoughts and feel each other's feelings, all three of you." The questions made each of the three flinch, and then, in turn, bow their heads in shame. Silence filled the room. None knew exactly how to take this news. Queen Iren's high, loud laughter startled everyone. "You all look as though this is the end of the world." "This is premature." "Sure, and two instead of one. However, from Lista's veil and Kira's lack of tears, it seems my son has set things right. They saved your life, and you offered a crown to both, did you not?" She grinned at her son as she finished. Prince Hanner let out a breath that he had been holding. "Yes, mother. I have pledged my heart, my sword, and my life to each. Together, as one, they accepted. We know the tradition is broken. The gods spoke as much on the prayer rock. They told me our bond would be the strongest yet." "So both our daughters are to wed the prince? Is the bond you spoke of already in place? What choice do we have, then? I accept these new terms if my daughter has already agreed." "King Everi?" Queen Sandria hugged her daughter in warm congratulations as she waited for the king's proclamation. "This bond is ancient and unbreakable. My daughter already dons the veil of marriage. If she has accepted these terms, I will not have her go back on her word. She will reap the consequences of her hasty actions." He turned to look at his daughter, vexed at her actions. Cymbalia rose and embraced her daughter, much as Queen Sandria did. "We need to make adjustments to the wedding and coronation," King Kristoff said as he motioned for Trent to bring his plans and notes. "I believe we should send the young ones off to bathe and rest. The feast begins in 3 hours." Prince Hanner bowed, and as he straightened he remembered. "Oh, Father, I promised Princess Kira she may bond with the foal as a wedding present. It should be done quickly. Take her to the priest then. They will be glad to assist with the ritual. That is, if her queen has no objections." Queen Cindria looked to her daughter and nodded, saying she was pleased with the notion. The heirs bowed deeply to their elders and made their way out of the room. Princess Lista was taken to her chambers immediately to attend her grooming for the banquet. Princess Kira followed the prince through the castle to the temple, the unicorn foal playfully running behind. As they entered the temple courtyard, Prince Hanner explained the task for which he had come. An hour later, Princess Kira touched the unicorn tattoo on her inner palm gleefully. She ran her hands over the neck of the foal, in the spot where a red fox had emblazoned itself in the fur. She kissed the filly as servants came to take the sleepy animal to the stables. "She will be fine. You will know if she is not. She will let you know when she wakes." Prince Hanner smiled at Princess Kira, who was already tearing up at the distance of her companion. "Oh, she is so beautiful when she has tears glistening in her eyes. Joy in her life will make her one of the most beautiful in the world." Princess Kira smiled at him, shyly reminding him that she heard his thoughts. Prince Hanner watched Princess Kira leave as she was led to her bath. "She is beautiful, and I love her almost as much as you, my prince. However, some of us are trying to sleep if we can keep our feelings just a little bit quieter." Prince Hanner looked toward the orchard side of the castle and thought himself bowing to the lady very loudly, smiling wide as he felt her frustration. He took himself to his chambers to prepare for the banquet. 2 hours later, a servant was sent to summon Prince Hanner to the feast. The banquet hall looked no different from the last banquet he attended, apart from the colors decorating the table. He waited just within the door for the princesses to arrive, knowing they would play a large part in tonight's festivities. However, he didn't have to wait long. Kira entered the room first. Her bright red floor-length gown shone brightly. It hugged her curves and was cut into a V shape low enough to tempt. Around her neck was placed a black choker fitted with rubies in the form of a fox. An exquisite K glistened gold in the middle of its head. From the chain between her ears, tiny tear-shaped rubies glittered. Prince Hanner approached her and knelt before her. "A true fiancé of mine would wear a ring, as I didn't have one before. Please accept this one now." He placed on her finger a large ruby surrounded by diamonds large enough to cover her finger from knuckle to knuckle. Kira smiled fondly and began showing off the ring immediately, glancing back to the prince as he rose. A satisfied smile graced his face. "I knew joy would make her beautiful." Kira looked back to the prince and blushed brightly. He watched her bend low to show her little sister, Abi, who squealed with excitement. He caught a hint of jealousy in her elder sister's smile. "So, joy does not make me as beautiful then? Do I not merit a trinket to prove others I am yours?" The voice laughed in his mind and showed him the adoring smile he was watching Kira with. Prince Hanner rolled his eyes at the vision and laughed loudly, drawing several eyes toward him. He turned to the door and saw her. Princess Lista was leaning her long, slender body against the gate, allowing them a moment before she entered. She wore a tight, sheath mermaid dress, with cutouts at the hips, high-necked but sleeveless, the color of flawless emeralds. Long gloves graced the length of her arms, stopping mid-bicep where snakes encrusted in gold and emerald held them in place. A long rope of gold hung loosely around her neck, and she had changed her veil to match her gown. Gracefully, a golden snake circlet anchored it to her head. Prince Hanner gaped openly and thought, "With beauty like I have between the two of you, my heart feels like I should die from it bursting." Humor and appreciation flowed back to him as he shook his head and headed to Princess Lista. My princess, I do have a ring for you." He knelt before her, as he did Kira. "But I have been told this is the traditional jewelry to present you with." He slid a golden hand flower bracelet onto her wrist, the flower gold filigree with an emerald in the center. The ring, attached to the flower with a delicate tennis bracelet chain, alternating diamonds and emeralds, was a replica of Kira's ring and emeralds and diamonds. Lista's eyes grew big and bright, her smile reaching her eyes. "You show me more care and attention than my father. He is still mad at me." Her mood quickly lowered, and she turned from him to begin showing others, as Kira had done. Being the eldest daughter, there was no jealousy, but her eldest brother looked uninterested in her new trinket. Inwardly, Prince Hanner frowned, but didn't have time to ponder on the trouble in their family. Dinner was quickly announced, and they headed to the top of the table next to their respective parents. Prince Hanner sat next to Princess Kira across from Princess Lista. Lista kept her head down, her family preferring to talk around her instead of with her. Dinner ended after some time, and everyone relaxed and enjoyed the conversations around them. Finally, King Kristoff stood and called attention to the head of the table. "We gather this evening to welcome back Prince Hanner from his hunt for his companion. Princess Lista and Princess Kira accompanied him on this escapade. All returned unharmed. Prince Hanner has tamed young Manticore and given him the name of Aruz. I am also informed on their way home, Princess Kira claimed a young unicorn who was endangered by a surveyor, whom Aruz killed swiftly. She has been bonded to the foal, giving her the name of Rosette in honor of her rose coloring. We have the honor to announce upon their successful return, the prince has earned his right to be sanctioned crown prince. Therefore, by the gods' will, we will crown Princess Lista," he paused and bowed lightly to her, "and Princess Kira as our crowned princesses. Their marriage will be celebrated tomorrow. So please, enjoy the remaining entertainments of the evening. Congratulate our heirs." Everyone stood at the first notes of music and began making their circles, some dancing, some drinking and talking. Aruz drew a small crowd around him, the prince at his side, animatedly describing the fight with the Manticore, occasionally glancing up and searching for the princesses. Princess Kira was surrounded by ladies, all listening, enamored with her stories. None noticed as Princess Lista made her way to the side of the room and observed everyone. Queen Sandria spoke in hushed tones to her eldest daughter. The latter was making no attempt at controlling her discontent at not being the first to marry. Little Princess Abby circled the group near Aruz, trying to get as close as possible to see if the cub would like to play. King Kristoff gestured for the entertainment to stop near midnight. "We have a wedding to attend to tomorrow morning. It is best your heirs make their way to their chambers for rest. Congratulations again, Prince Hanner, on your successful hunt. Tomorrow you hunt a different animal. Taming marriage will be harder than taming Aruz. Now, off to bed." King Kristoff waved the three heirs out of the door. Bowing, the prince and princesses quickly and wearily parted ways to get some much-needed sleep. Prince Hanner entered his chambers with half-closed eyes and stopped, noting Trent's presence inside the door. "Congratulations, my prince. I have your itinerary for the morning mapped out. I must also inform you that your father has placed my services under your care. I am happy to serve the next great king and his queens." Trent bowed low at the statement. As he straightened, he began the rundown of the next day's events. "Tomorrow we will allow you to sleep till late morning. Then grooming for you and Aruz. The wedding will begin at dusk, per King Everi's instructions. I will inform you of the task you are to perform tomorrow." He bowed and left the prince to get ready for sleep in his comfortable bed. Before he drifted off, Aruz jumped into bed and stretched out. "I hope he doesn't growl in his sleep." Prince Hannah heard Princess Lista snicker just before Rest took him into the darkness. Chapter 9. The Trochea Accord. Princess Lista was awakened before dawn. Sleepily, she followed where the hands led her. Finally, the servants came to take her to her bath in preparation for the wedding. No males were allowed to attend to her today, so she can go without her veil. The morning ritual passed slowly with cleansing and prayer. I don't think I've been so clean in my entire life, the Lista thought, exasperated when they continued with more cleansing. I believe they have rubbed the fur off my backside, came the response from the equally tortured Kira. Noon brought a reprieve from the cleansing, as the princesses could dine together, so long as they didn't get dirty. Finally, they arrived at one of the entertainment rooms for ladies in their dressing gowns. They were greeted by their mothers and Queen Irene, as servants were busy setting the table with food. My dear princesses, you will get to spend the rest of the day together until the ceremony, so you won't be bored alone. Queen Irene gestured to the grand room, which was fitted with two of everything: vanities, dress stands, and attendants. I guess that means that we are clean enough for now. Now we get to be pretty. Lista looked to Kira and smiled, dreading what they would poke and prod until they deemed the girls pretty. First, I eat. The servant didn't give me any breakfast. I don't care if they have to tear my face off to make it clean. I'm going to eat something. Kira looked longingly at the table with stew and bread set on it. You two will have the most interesting wedding our kingdom has seen yet. Lista, I believe your snake has been chosen, and your father is off getting his sword sharpened now. Kira, we have chosen a length of robin blue silk and made it into a rope required for the handfasting. It should be long enough for the three of you, so I believe we have everything set. Queen Irene looked to the other queens for confirmation. Both agreed and continued eating. Kira looked at Lista after she finished the first bowl of stew with curious eyes. Mind telling me what the snake and sword are for? Am I to do something with them? Lista flushed and looked down, not wanting to spoil the meal. It is best if you finish eating first. Don't worry too much. I will kill the snake. It's after that we have to hold our composure. I hope there will be good wine after. Lista grimaced over her food bowl. You're right. Stew's too good. I will just wait to figure out what you're doing later. I'll just go along and make my peace knowing it's not going to be pretty. Kira picked up her spoon and downed the second bowl. Servants took the spoon from her when she finished, wiping her face, and rushed her to sit in front of her vanity. Hours of torture went by as the servants did their hair and nails and colored their faces and eyes. Lista had long, slender gem strands attached to the scales on her head, then arranged if they were her hair. The long beaded strands weighed down Lista's head considerably, making it difficult to keep her head straight. I prefer having your hair to these things. They are heavy and gaudy. Yours is pretty and looks so much more comfortable. Lista shot Kira a look of pure jealousy, to which Kira replied, I'm sorry. I can't hear you. I believe they pulled my brain out through my hair roots. At least yours isn't attached. They both laughed out loud, startling the servants. 2 hours till dusk the princesses were slipped into their wedding dresses, white, with the colors of their families boldly displayed. Kira's dress fitted her body snugly. From breast to knee, white silk ended in collected tulle. The ends of the tulle held captive flowers of red and gold, which fluttered with each shift of her weight, giving the impression of fire at her feet. Her corset was red with gold trim, a giant silk bow attached to the back to hide the laces, its tail dragging the ground behind her. I wouldn't be caught dead in something like this. Bows and frill? Ugh, yuck. Snickering came from the bond, but it was hard for her to tell if it was Lista or Hanner, the latter of whom they hadn't heard from all day. Finally Kira turned, saw the frown on Lista's face, and determined it wasn't her who was laughing this time. The dress Lista was placed in could hardly be called a dress by conservative measures. A black choker held up the top of her white bodice, which was scarcely big enough to cover her breasts. Black silk ribbon crisscrossed her bare midriff, ending, after hugging her hips, and combining at the back of her thighs, where another large bow in black and green was attached. Covering her hips and rear, a soft velvet triangle was attached to the ribbons. In the front a green silk snake banner hung down the middle of her dress, reaching her toes before it ended. Attached to the black silk was another set of ribbons, flowing over her thighs to the ground over green silk to cover her outer legs. Mid-thigh the silk stopped at tulle fashioned like Kira's. Light green tulle was used as an undercoat, with white on top, splitting in the front to allow room for the banner and movement. Oh, gods. It's only for one evening. Please let me ruin it badly. Lista continued to frown at the gown. Despite the princess's distaste for their gowns, the ceremony marched on, and soon they found themselves at the closed door to the throne room. It had been decided, since there were two of them, they would walk with each other down to the dais and wed Prince Hanner. Tension flowed through the three-way bond from all sides. As the doors slowly opened, the princesses took a deep breath, looking at each other and then nodding. Together, they stepped forward into their future. Prince Hanner stood by the priest at the front of the dais, shifting his weight nervously. He turned at the trumpets announcing his brides. For once that day, he was speechless. Both princesses walked down the aisle created by the crowds, heads held high, holding hands and beautiful bouquets. How in all the world did I get so lucky to get two beautiful, talented, and skilled women? Prince Hanner stepped between the two as they approached the dais. The priest began prayers and started the ceremony. None were given the option to object to the union, as the magical bond prevented any other actions. Prince Hanner, take your brides under your wings and provide them your protection from this day forth. The priest waited a moment and continued. As the three of you will become one, we have adjusted your vows from man and wife to the union. Your marriage shall break tradition and be referred to as the trochia. The priest waited for the three to nod their assent before he continued. Prince Hanner, do you take the trochia to have, hold, and cherish equally, to rule with and stand by through all the times ahead? Prince Hanner looked to his brides and smiled. To the trochia I pledge my life's blood, to have, hold, cherish, rule, and stand by through eternity. My protection and household are theirs. My princesses, do you both take the trochia as your own, to have and hold, rule and stand by, bear heirs for all the time to come? Princess Lista and Kira looked at each other, smiled, and looked into Hanner's eyes. Then, in unison, they repeated the oath back to the priest, just as Prince Hanner had. Please join your right hands in a triangle. As this ribbon anchors your hands, so shall your lives be anchored, bonded together through all trials. The priest wound through their hands and attached the ends in the middle, symbolizing unity in the customs of the Listican people. As he quickly removed the ribbon, the priest continued the last of the ceremony, retrieving a golden goblet from the table to his right. King Christophe and King Everi stepped up with a large basket between them, King Christophe's face full of disgust. Gasp issued from the crowd as the lid was lifted and a giant cobra sprang forth from the bottom. In a traditional stance for the bride of the zamaj, Lista crouched in front of the trochea. Then, as her father reached her side, backing away from the snake, arms held behind him, she pulled his sword from his hips and stalked forward. A quick kill will spell doom for our marriage. Too long, and it looks like I'm weak. Lista rounded the snake once, and it lunged at her once or twice. She found a suitable opening and sliced its head off in one clean stroke. She picked up its head and let the blood drain into the goblet held at arm's length by the priest, disgust evident on his face. Princess Lista took the goblet and knelt, sword in her hand, across her knee, before the two whom she was pledging her life, and raised her cup. For your protection, I have slain the beast. I will never let others come between us, from now until I cannot draw sword again. Princess Lista looked into their eyes with sorrow and disgust filling her face, as she raised the goblet to her lips, and then offered it to each. Oh, I'm so glad you didn't tell me. This is so gross. Princess Kira outwardly kept a straight face as she took her sip and handed the cup to Prince Hanner, who did not hesitate or cringe. He handed the goblet back to the priest, who added a small vial of clear liquid to the goblet and set it alight. Your bond is sealed in the fire of sacrifice, protection, and vow. May your sword stay sharp and your aim true. Prince Hanner took the princess's hands and turned them toward the crowd. The priest announced, At this time, it is my pleasure to present you, His Highness, Prince Hanner Sokol, and his wives, Princess Lista and Princess Kira. May their flight be long and joyous. Prince Hanner leaned to each, kissing them with the equal pleasure of a man happy to be just married. Then he led them down the aisle to a small room where they would change for the reception. Getting Lista cleaned up was a priority. You both made me so happy today. You're so beautiful and skilled and pleasing. I hope you were both pleased by the ceremony? Prince Hanner smiled at both as they looked at him with exasperated looks. You must be joking. I hate my dress. I'm bloody. I'm tired, and these gems are hurting my head. Lista looked up from the floor of the room where she had sat, as she smiled. But I wouldn't have traded it for the world. Though our ceremony was missing one crucial part. I need my last kiss. She looked teasingly at Kira, who understood at once. They were wed as sister wives, and didn't get to display their affection openly at the ceremony. Kira laughed at her, knowing too well that she was only joking. Just acknowledging the bond between man and woman was just as equal between woman and woman. Once their triangle was complete with their swift kiss, they all sat in silence, happy and content for the first time during the week. The doors opened, and several servants swarmed the room with dividers, basins of water and sponges, and new dresses. Weary at being dressed like dolls all day, the two princesses stood and were ushered into their respective spaces to be changed and, in Lista's case, cleaned up. Once they were redressed and readied again, they were taken back to the entrance to the throne room. King Christophe awaited their return impatiently. King Everi and his Simbai had enjoyed their part of the wedding, and they were taking scales from the dead snake to fashion Lista a wedding bracelet later on. As the trochea re-entered the throne room, King Christophe demanded attention of those present. Now, as all the traditions have been observed, let us retire to the banquet hall and celebrate. King Christophe led the way to the banquet hall, his queen at his side, smiling widely. The wedding banquet passed in joy and humor.
with plenty of food and wine. The cake was given round, the brides and groom toasted. Everyone was dancing and enjoying each other's company. Parents of the Trochia danced together, others drank more deeply than they had allowed themselves to all week. Finally, close to midnight, 3 priests entered the hall and spoke with King Kristoff. I am afraid my dear son and daughters must make off for the night. Their vows to each other are still incomplete." He winked at his son before continuing. "Let's celebrate their consummation and bonding." King Kristoff toasted the Trochia and downed his goblet of wine quickly. Prince Hanner bowed to his parents and in-laws as he exited, his brides following him out the door. They were greeted by Aruz and his keeper just outside the banquet hall. Breathlessly the keeper explained he wouldn't stay away any longer. Prince Hanner smiled, knelt, and pet his great cat. The princesses bent down to give him some attention. "Now, you must go sleep with Rosita tonight. Keep her company, and tell her I will see her in the morning." Princess Kira kissed his head as Aruz let out a pained whine. He bowed his head and turned back to the stables. Princess Kira laughed loudly as she watched him go. "He wanted to sleep on the soft blankets in your chamber, my husband. You might need a bigger bed for all of us to fit. I will take it under consideration in the morning. But first, let's just see how much room the 2 of you take up." He grinned ear to ear, letting his love flow through the bond to both. Princess Lista raised her brow. "I was under the impression you weren't to sleep tonight. You do have 2 of us to please." Prince Hanner's frown faltered, and he glanced toward the 2 devious women standing next to him, remembering his dream from the beginning of the week. The Trochia entered Prince Hanner's room, with the priest following. Trent bowed low. "The priests will leave as soon as they have witnessed the consummation of the marriage. We have prepared the room for you, handmaids to assist the princesses, and I am here to help prepare you." Hanner nodded and allowed the princesses to be tended to behind their respective screens. He followed Trent to the corner, removed his shoes, and sat in his usual chair. Trent looked troubled but remained silent and fidgeted as he helped the prince remove his clothes and prepare for bed. Finally, Prince Hanner had enough when Trent had asked the same question for the 3rd time. "Oh, Trent, what is it that distracts you so?" Trent gasped and bowed his head. "Oh, sire, forgive me for my forthrightness. I'm having a little trouble figuring out how to tend to 2 ladies at once. And forgive me, I'm having trouble figuring out how you will tonight." Prince Hanner laughed at the timid nature of his assistant. He glanced to the other side of the rooms where the princesses were completing their bedtime rituals. Eventually he whispered, "I haven't a clue how I will. But for you, I suggest gaining another assistant or 2 to tend to their own agendas." With a deep breath the prince headed to the bed, where the priests waited. As he climbed into the middle of the bed the princesses sat on either side. Then they all turned to the priest, who prayed for a long life and many heirs, blessing their wedding bed. For once today, I haven't a clue what I'm going to do. I'm at a loss, and I don't like the attention when I don't have confidence." Prince Hanner looked to each of his princesses, who looked to each other and smiled. "Oh, we will distract you from your travels, husband. Do not worry about yourself." Lista leaned in and kissed him slowly, allowing the desire she felt to flood the bond, erasing all thoughts from his mind. "We will attend to the ritual. Here is our domain. Here you do as we say. Just let us handle this tonight." Kira leaned in and placed her soft lips on Hanner, his desire palpable through the bond. He leaned back and allowed the princesses to do as they wanted, sacrificing a feather or two to their whims. Each stroke, touch, and kiss was amplified threefold over the bond. The awkward moments faded quickly with their minds connected, feeling as each other felt, knowing instantly what was terrific. After some time the room was emptied, and the priest positive the consummation ritual concluded for both princesses. The Trochia, however, continued to enjoy each other's pleasures to the small hours of the night. "Your Grace, you asked that I report to you when the ritual was completed? They have consummated the marriage." Trent bowed low to King Kristoff, who was slowly staggering down the corridor to his bedchamber. Queen Irene tried to steady his walk as they rounded the last corner, his weight leaning on her, forcing her to stumble every few steps. King Kristoff nodded and stumbled to a chair in his bedchamber the last few steps. "Good. So we have 2 future queens with possible future heirs. My son does well." Queen Irene smiled wearily as she passed Trent. "See him to bed for me. I must go check on the children before I retire. Hawken has had another night of terror and refuses to sleep until I attend him." She swept down the corridor quickly, intent on attending to her youngest so she could retire. Trent assisted King Kristoff's bed rituals, leaving him in the massive bed passed out. His snores could be heard in the nursery down the hall. As Trent left the room, he posted the guards and servants at the door, as was his custom, while he was still the king's assistant. Queen Irene returned to her chamber only an hour later, exhausted from tending to her child. As she reached the guards, she staggered and screamed, gripping the front of her gown. Crimson stained the dress, flowing freely from her heart. She dropped to the floor as the guards turned and entered the bedchamber, the servants kneeling at her side. Sitting next to the bed, cleaning his dagger, sat the dark, shadowy figure of King Froy, with Abner dead at his feet. The king lay in the bed where Trent had left him, crimson blood pooling on the sheet. Smiling devilishly, he shouted in the magically enhanced voice so all in the castle could hear, "Your king is dead, and so is your queen. The Uni will rule your land soon. I decree it so. Your fledgling prince will fall soon. The darkness has arrived." King Froy disappeared in a vast purple flame, leaving only the knife he had killed the royals with, its hilt emblazoned in the ever-seeing eye of Uni and its 5 flames. Destruction and death. This week brings you the point where Prince Hanner must decide what to do. Not only that, but now there's no king ruling over Sokol. As Prince Hanner has not been made the prince heir yet, what will they decide? His parents dead on his wedding night must be very destructive to their relationship. We will see. That's all I have for you this time. I hope you enjoyed these 2 chapters, and I hope that you come back for the next one, as it only gets better from here. Remember to like, share, and consider joining us so that you can get advanced copies of our podcast. Make sure you visit the Patreon page. There's plenty of awesome merchandise there that you can get for only a few dollars a month. We look forward to seeing you next time.